Welcome to Embrace Joy, where we are walking the road to restoration. My name is Joy LaPiccolo. I am a certified life coach working with trauma survivors for over 20 years. And I think it's really important, especially right now, for us to talk a little bit about voting, especially as it comes to if we have experienced trauma. If you have listened to other podcasts with me, you know that if you have experienced any type of trauma, which all of us have experienced some kind of trauma, but if you have experienced trauma, especially in childhood, it can leave long lasting scars. It affects how we think, how we act, how we feel, all the way into adulthood. And one of the ways that this shows up is through fear of authority. When someone has experienced trauma involving authority figures, it can change how they interact with people in positions of power later on in life. And that includes how they approach politics and voting. So today we're going to talk about the fear of authority due to childhood trauma. And we're going to talk about why trusting politicians are difficult. And then we're going to talk about action steps to move from feeling powerless to being empowered. Voting is one of the most important ways to express your voice, even when trust is hard to come by. Childhood trauma can take many forms. Some of us have experienced different types of abuse. You may have experienced neglect. Another type of trauma is witnessing violence. And when it comes to it involving an authority figure, like a parent or a teacher or any other caregiver, it can deeply affect how we see authority as adults. For kids, authority figures represent safety and control. But when these same figures are abusive or unreliable, that trust is shattered, often leaving behind feelings of helplessness and a lingering fear of authority. As adults, people who've gone through this kind of trauma have a hard time trusting anybody, especially those in authority. They may see authority figures as threatening or unreliable. This can include a boss at work, law enforcement, and then, yes, politicians. Because of past experiences, even the idea of engaging with authority, whether through voting or other means, can trigger anxiety or feelings of being vulnerable. Sometimes that will cause a person to avoid political participation altogether. I know for me, I had a lot of problems trusting authority figures as a child due to a lot of abuse, a lack of safety. I saw into adulthood how that was affecting me with relationships with others, including at work, but also how I made decisions. So the fear of authority is something that we need to address. One of the most common struggles trauma survivors face when it comes to voting is a deep seated distrust of political candidates. So, after experiencing betrayal or hurt from authority figures in the past, sometimes it can feel almost impossible to trust the promises that politicians are making. Many of us who have experienced trauma automatically assume that political leaders are being manipulative or dishonest. And that assumption is because of our past experiences and the fact that authority figures betrayed us. Now, this kind of skepticism, it is a form of self-protection, but it can also lead to disengagement. So when you feel like no one in power is trustworthy, sometimes it's hard to motivate yourself to even participate in the political process. You might feel like voting is pointless because in the past, no one followed through on what they promised. And we're going to talk a little bit about the fact that we need to go ahead and speak up anyway. So another thing that I was thinking of is for many of us who've experienced trauma, we can get triggered in this whole election process. So let's face it, politics is full of conflict. Political debates, whether on TV or online, often they turn into intense arguments filled with raised voices, accusations, and now foul language. So for trauma survivors, this kind of confrontations can actually be an emotional trigger. If you've lived through an abusive situation, either with authority figures in your past or a spouse, when you watch these political arguments, it can often bring up the same feelings of fear and powerlessness. So I understand the hesitation of even wanting to be part of the political process. I do encourage you to avoid debates. If you're getting triggered, avoid the debates. Limit the time that you spend listening to political news and discussions, because I know it is very overwhelming. The conflict, though, I want to make sure you know, is you still need to stay informed and engaged. Voting is supposed to be empowering. Voting is a way to have a say and influence the direction of your country. But if you have struggled in the past with feeling powerless, voting can feel like just another situation where your voice might not be heard. When you have been conditioned to feel like you don't matter or that your opinions aren't valued, it's easy to think that your vote won't make a difference. As a person who has experienced domestic violence, I was told time and time again that my opinions were not valued, that I was stupid. And so sometimes in the past, I let those words determine the decisions that I was going to make and not thinking that my voice mattered. But I hope that coming on today will explain to you that, first of all, those words from the other person telling you that your opinion doesn't matter, that's not true. That sense of powerlessness because of the authority figures or what other people have said, when that powerlessness comes in, if you are being triggered because you see politicians as being distant or you hear that they are corrupt, it kind of feels like the political candidates may not care about you. I want to encourage you, though, to still speak up. Even though fear and distrust may be holding you back, again, voting is a way to reclaim your power. It is a way to speak up and make choices that can impact not just your life, but your entire community. Every time you vote, you're taking back a little bit of the control that trauma might have taken away from you. And let me explain to you, it's not just choosing a candidate. It's about recognizing that your voice matters. The act of voting is a way to show yourself that despite what you might have been taught by those authority figures in your past, you do have power and you do have a say. So it's, like I said, it may be easy to feel like your vote doesn't count, but voting actually is a collective action. Your vote is one of millions. And together, these votes decide who goes into office and what policies are implemented. When you vote, you are actually contributing to a larger movement. You're joining others in shaping the future of your country, your community, and your life. And having that collective power is so healing. You are not alone. If you have experienced trauma, sometimes we feel very alone. But in the voting process, we are coming together again as a community where each one of us can speak up. And when all of us come together, that's what makes a real difference. You know, one of the other things that I was thinking of is that something is empowering is politicians work for us, not the other way around. When you vote, you're actually playing a role in deciding who gets to lead and whether they get to keep their jobs. For trauma survivors who felt powerless under authority in the past, this can be a big shift in our perspective. You're no longer at the mercy of authority. You get to decide who has power. So if you are someone that has been let down by authority figures before, I understand it's normal to feel skepticism. The key is to approach voting with a healthy level of caution without letting the distrust prevent you from participating. So there's a couple things that you can do to take action. One is research. Look at the person's track record. Instead of just listening to what the candidates are saying during their campaign, take a deeper look at what they've actually done in the past. Research their past voting records. Look at what policies they have supported in the past. How have they behaved in previous leadership roles? This can actually give you a clearer idea of whether they are trustworthy. Be sure to use reliable sources. In today's world, misinformation is everywhere, especially in politics. Be sure to stick to credible, nonpartisan sources because fact-checking websites can help you cut through the noise and figure out what's real and what's just campaign talk. One of the websites that I have used for a long time, every single election, even the local elections, is vote411.org. This is a nonpartisan site that will list all of the candidates, where they stand on different campaign promises, and you can compare candidates with one another. And it will also be very detailed about your local elections. And speaking of local elections, national politics can often feel distant and hard to trust. But local elections often have a direct impact on your daily life. So it is easier to verify their actions and promises of local candidates, making it feel more personal and less overwhelming. So do the research of the individuals in your local community. Now, another thing that I wanted to mention as a step to overcome the distrust and feeling like you don't want to participate is making sure you engage with your community about conversations. But who is your community? Who is trustworthy? Engage with people in your community who care about the same issues you do. These conversations can help you feel more informed and less isolated in your decision-making process. But again, make sure that these individuals are not toxic, are not critical. They are just being objective and sharing thoughts and ideas. So fear of authority exists. It can be intense, but it doesn't have to keep you from voting or participating in the political process. I want to make sure that you acknowledge that you do have a fear of authority and realize that it is there. Acknowledge that that fear of authority is a result of past experiences, but it doesn't change who you're going to be now or in the future. You can begin to work through those fears instead of avoiding it. I mentioned about researching. Knowledge is power. The more informed you are about the political process, the more confident you'll feel when it comes time to vote. Research the issues that matter to you. Learn about the candidates and understand how your vote can make an impact. You don't have to do this through all this political campaign. You don't have to do it alone. And not just with voting, even though that's what I'm talking about today. Any type of issue that is holding you back from living the life that God has designed for you is trauma and needs to be healed. You do not have to do this alone. This healing process from trauma is so important. And that is why I'm so passionate about being a life coach. So I can guide you through this healing process to live the life that God has designed for you. If political debates or campaigns have been overwhelming, take steps to protect your mental health. We need to protect our mindset. I just did a webinar last night talking about panic and how we can find peace. And so if you are starting to feel panicky over some of the campaign promises and the arguments going back and forth, take a break from the news, focus on small, manageable ways to stay informed. And it's okay to step away when things get too intense. We need to lower the panic and find that peace. So when you are going in to vote, and please vote, there's early voting in a lot of states right now. And of course, the day of voting is Tuesday, November 5th. When you are ready to vote, do so with purpose. Remind yourself why voting matters to you personally. Whether you're advocating for a cause you care about, you're wanting to hold leaders accountable, or you're simply exercising your right to be heard, vote with intention. The fear of authority is real, especially for those of us who have experienced childhood trauma. And it can make political engagement feel intimidating. But again, voting is one of the most powerful tools to help you reclaim control over your life and your future. Your vote is your voice, and it matters every single time. Even if trusting politicians is hard and the system feels overwhelming, voting is still your opportunity to make a statement about what kind of world you live in. You do not have to let past trauma keep you on the sidelines. Step into that voting booth with intention. knowing that your voice counts. By voting, you're not just choosing a candidate, you're helping shape a society that reflects your values, again, holds leaders accountable, and creates opportunity for positive change. So, as the next election approaches, commit to making your voice heard. Research, prepare, and take that step. Don't let fear silence you. Show up, speak up, and vote. So, if you are ready to move beyond your past and take back control of your life, I offer one on one coaching and guide you through the support to heal, to live the life that you deserve. I encourage you to start your journey towards growth and empowerment today. It's time to step in to healing. If you've experienced hurt or heartbreak, you deserve hope and healing, and that is out there. So schedule a call with me to learn more about one-on-one coaching, and let's go vote and make sure you pray for discernment as you decide who you're going to vote for. God is the one on the throne, and he will direct our path.